In this video, I'm going to walk you through how you can use poetry to better understand this thing called life, discover who you are, and ultimately generate a more fulfilling and rich existence in the process.
Raspberry mountains tumble across my doorstep. Eager to be climbed, tasted, I've swam through earthquakes once before, swallowed by fields of lavender waffles, drowning in the gravity of nectar orbiting around me, my ego still sore. Wake up. Peel your dreams off the floor.
What comes to mind when you think of poetry? Maybe it's whimsical stories from Dr. Seuss, or more profound verses from authors like Shakespeare or Walt Whitman. Maybe you can even recount a time that you wrote something that you found really beautiful, or felt trying to do so. Or perhaps a time that you went and read a poem but couldn't fully understand what it really meant. For the longest time, poetry was an enigma to me, an art form reserved only for the most intellectually gifted people, which I clearly wasn't, and I was intimidated by it, reading it, let alone writing it. That is, until I was pushed to write my first real poem in 8th grade literature in my early teens. It was through that process that I began to see words differently and uncover the real power and point of poetry, to make sense of this thing called life.
Poetry can be a window to the soul, a bridge between the creative wisdom of the universe and the philosophical notions that are within us. The world is full of chaos, always changing, in flux, full of ups and downs, curveballs, pleasant surprises, hardships, growth, more emotions than we have words for. Life is unbelievably incomprehensible at times, but poetry helps.
At the very least, it's helped me, time and time again, it's helped me process beauty, loss, and traumatic events of varying degrees. It's helped me unearth the most deepest parts of myself so that I can discover what brings me joy, build a life that strengthens my weaknesses, and ultimately cultivate self-love and acceptance so I can move forward more authentically, knowing without a doubt that I am living this fleeting life in the most fulfilling way possible. That is why I want to share how poetry can do the same for you. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how you can use poetry to better understand this thing called life, discover who you are, and ultimately generate a more fulfilling and rich existence in the process. Step 1, create space to discover something new. We're going to go on a journey, but it's only going to work if you're open to new ideas, to new ways of thinking, new realizations, new ways of being. The best poetry, the most life-changing, impactful poetry, is given the space it needs to take shape, both mental space and physical space. Poetry is the product of your internal state as well as your external environment. And the next steps are going to help us expand both. Step 2, notice. Expand your awareness to notice what the universe is trying to tell you. If you aren't paying attention, you may just miss it. So take the time to notice the details of life. Experience things, then experience them deeper. Here's a few tips to get you on your way.
1. Experience new things. Do you always go right? Take a left instead. 2. Go slower. No matter what you're doing, do it slower. Are you eating dinner, reading a book, walking through an art gallery? Whatever it is, take at least twice as long to do it. May I suggest an exercise of staring at something you find beautiful? Perhaps a tree, a flower, a work of art, maybe somebody you know, for 10 minutes straight. I know, it might be weird in moments, but try it. The modern world is only speeding up, giving us less and less time to actually appreciate the complexities and nuances of everyday experiences. Life is numbed to get through it all, but if you stop and slow down, You can give yourself time to notice the intricate details that every moment offers, the small things that give life its color. 3. Savor it. Savor the moment you're in. Realize that no moment is guaranteed. Instead of taking them for granted and rushing through them, spend your time thinking about what you're actually doing right now. Give this moment your full attention. 4. Look around. It's easy to fall into routine. Visit the same coffee shops, walk the same paths, drive the same roads, and even if you continue to frequent these places, try expanding what you notice about them. Can you tell me how many windows are in your favorite cafe? Or identify how many unique species of trees you pass on your way to work? Probably not. These are the details that sink into the background of life, into the realm of the mundane. But look around, notice these things. There's always more to learn about your environment, a new way of looking at it. And it's the accumulation of these details that allow you to write great poetry. And 5, look inside. Instead of filling every moment with stimulus and distraction, take the rare moments you have to yourself and actually be with yourself. Be with your thoughts. I know it's scary at times and really hard at times, but that's okay. You don't need to understand everything, especially right now. All you need is to be aware of who is there. As a bonus tip, journaling is a great practice for strengthening your ability to turn inwards and convert abstract thoughts and emotions into something more tangible and relate them back to actual experiences. It helps you look inside by forcing you to take a third-person point of view of your own life, and it's always easier to understand things from a little distance. By creating space to notice the world around us, as well as various parts of ourselves, we begin building stacks of intricate and diverse experiences to draw from when we begin to write poetry, the process that will ultimately help us make sense of all the things we've noticed.
Which brings us to step 3, deciding how to write poetry. There are dozens of ways to write poetry, from ballads to limericks to haikus to sonnets, all of which are distinguished by their various use of writing constraints.
Constraints are a powerful tool that can radically change the process of writing poetry and its effectiveness in helping you process your life experiences. To get practical, here are various constraints deployed across different forms of poetry: rhyme scheme, meter, stanzaic structure, syllable constraints, word count, line length, poem length, topic or theme, language usage, repetition, use of punctuation, density, sparsity, voice, tone.
Obviously, there are tons of constraints that I'm not going to bore you with. If you're new to poetry, just keep it simple, keep it accessible, and over time, explore. For now, I'm going to introduce you to a very simple way of approaching poetry: free verse.
Free verse is open, unconstrained, free to be whatever you want it to be, which is why I believe it is the most natural form of poetry and the most accessible for anyone, including beginners. It is flexible, fresh, and empowering, and in my opinion, the best form of poetry there is. So instead of worrying too much about constraints, lean into free verse and just keep some basic principles in mind when writing, all of which you can completely ignore, by the way, but are my recommendations for getting the most out of this process and producing a more beautiful result in the end. 1. Write how you speak. Whatever feels most natural. This helps tune into your most sincere inner voice, which is extremely helpful in better understanding who you are. For example, the rain reminds me of your kisses, and the days my soul used to swim in your eyes. The crisp morning air carried the sound of our breath and the scamper of your feet to my left when we ran through Memorial Park. I started with a sentence, just the natural flow of my thoughts, more or less how I speak, just like right now. Then through the editing process, I decided to put in line breaks and add in a few words, and voila.
The rain reminds me of your kisses and the days my soul used to swim in your eyes. Crisp morning air carries the sound of our breath, the scamper of your feet to my left, each sunrise as we ran through Memorial Park.
2. Draw on imagery and use metaphors and similes to convey ideas. These are powerful tools for adding depth to a poem. They also strengthen your ability to connect things, helping you make more sense of the world you find yourself in. For example, sunlight spattered crest of ocean fill my mouth as I'm carried by the cosmic undercurrent that runs through all things. I am not the same. I cannot be contained. We are water, floating in space that time creates to take the shape of a puzzle piece, falling asleep as we dream of the discoveries far beyond airplane window seats. This poem excerpt packs a lot of imagery into just a few lines. While there are several tactics used to do this, including overall word choice and hyper-specific scene building, it also contains very nuanced emotions I was working through by using metaphor and comparing myself to the properties of water as well as to puzzle pieces. 3. Be honest. Be emotional. Don't judge what comes out. Allow yourself to use words that pack a punch, that are sharp and specific. Poetry that moves you and others is rarely vague, but takes a stance in specificity and isn't afraid to be emotionally charged. In life, we can often go a very long time without sharing the most polarizing parts of ourselves. Instead, we try to blend in or keep peace when chatting with family and friends. Poetry is your chance to say what you really feel, your chance to let yourself free. As an example, yes, I am breathing, and my heart is beating, and I may be alive, but I am not free. I'm merely the broken version of me that used to be, trapped in this morning routine. Wherever I go, my pills must follow. No, wherever my pills go, I must follow. I am the dog, the pills are my leash. How can I be complete when I struggle to discern the space between where the bottle of pills and my life force meet? This poem excerpt revolves around very harsh truths that I was facing in the moment. In fact, I corrected myself and the framing of my entire predicament as I was writing it. I said no and reframed, which, as a side note, is a very common thing that happens when writing poetry, at least for me. This version of the poem felt way more authentic and freeing to lean into. Consequently, it left me feeling like I had a much better understanding of my circumstances in life. 4. Rhyming. Rhyming gives poetry its beautiful musical quality, but don't overdo it. Rhyming should be balanced with moments of non-rhyming. In fact, you actually don't have to rhyme at all, but I do highly recommend it. If you do choose to rhyme, keep in mind the downstream effects of your writing decisions. Your word choice now will completely change the direction your poem must go. For example, you may be aware of the butterfly effect, but are you aware of the butterfly-shaped organ that allows you to metabolize the food that you eat? It makes sure you grow your hair and that your heart keeps beating and beating on repeat. This life-sustaining organ is called your thyroid. Mine was stripped from me the 15th of December preceding 2023. The primary rhyme scheme was set into motion when I ended the third line with eat. While it took a few lines to get back to this sound, I eventually do so by ending the next rhyming line with repeat. If I ended the third line with some other word, the following lines would have turned into something very different. You may be aware of the butterfly effect, but are you aware of the butterfly-shaped organ that allows you to metabolize the food you consume? It makes sure you grow your hair and that your heart keeps beating and beating, clicking resume each second to provide life bloom. This life-sustaining organ is called your thyroid. Mine was stripped from me the 15th of December at noon. Now, I think both versions of this poem are beautiful and get the same idea across, but they definitely feel a little bit different. The main point I want to show is that my word choice at the start of this poem creates pressure for the later parts of the poem to flow in a certain direction. Additionally, take note that I don't force myself to the rhyme scheme at the end of every line. Instead, I write lines that allow the poem to breathe in different directions before returning to the rhyming conclusion. In my opinion, this allows the poem to come off as more refined and doesn't start to feel really old really quickly. It also makes it much easier to convey more complex ideas because you're not so stuck in a particular rhyme scheme. You may be aware of the butterfly effect, but are you aware of the butterfly-shaped organ in your neck? It allows you to metabolize the food you select and grow hair that projects? You get the idea. 5. Flow matters. Flow is what I use to describe the experience of a poem as you read it. Is it easy to read, to understand? Is it fun? Does it excite you? Is it upbeat or slow? Does it follow a long stream of consciousness or compose a collection of related but disparate thoughts? Is it telling a story, or is it a bit more abstract for the reader?
If there's anything you remember, it's flow equals feel. Poetry should feel good to read the same way music feels good to hear. And flow is what makes or breaks that feeling. It's a very personal decision and the hardest to get right when writing poetry. But like with anything else in life, the more you do it, the better you'll get. For now, just keep these few tools in mind to achieve great flow.
Tip 1. Stanza or paragraph separation. Knowing when and when not to create space between thoughts with an empty line. For example, this poem is constructed using 6 paragraphs, all of which are relatively the same length and have a similar flow. The paragraphical spacing is used as a tool to help the reader understand that the scene is changing. However, all of the paragraphs are connected thematically when you zoom out. Paragraphical spacing can be a great tool, particularly for longer poems. It keeps them digestible and less overwhelming for the reader. And as the writer, it gives you the chance to process particular components of a concept more distinctly, which can be very helpful when trying to better understand a very large or complex component of your life. 2. Line length and enjambment. Knowing when to start the next line and if it should be a continuation of the idea of the line above it. For example, what goes up must come down, a thought reminiscent of the ocean sounds that drown my ability to live freely. Held hostage by their impermanence and the reality of gravity that pulls at my youthful skin until it thins and begins to succumb to the merciless finitude that permeates my days as my face takes the shape of ripples in the wake that time creates as the amplitude of my fate becomes more apparent in the mirror. I am going to die. This is clear. Notice that all of these lines are one continuous string of consciousness. It is all the same sentence, so to speak. Each line references the context of the line above it. It grabs onto it and expands it, creating one constant continuation of imagery that compounds on itself, creating layers of complexity. In addition, this stacking or continuation of ideas allowed me to fully process this thought, to not oversimplify it for myself, but incorporate all the subtle nuances and variables of my reality that created the particular emotion I was trying to convey, and better understand it as I was writing it. Tip 3. Meter, or the flow of syllables. Word count and line count matter, but syllable count and the rate at which stressed syllables occur and add up over the course of the poem matter maybe more. For example, there is comfort soaking in the known routine that revolves around me. Predictability with a side of certainty poured out of a box each morning as I gaze into the bowl of cereal to see the events of the day rotating like cornflakes and milky mundane. Sweet at first, then the taste of death lingers on my tongue until sunset. Followed by bitter regret, I let another day shape my fate into sitcom reruns stuck between couch crevices and TV frames. There are a lot of subtle decisions that give this poem its flow. particularly around the use of filler words and the stressed syllable counts. To convey what I mean, here's another version where I've removed some words and pull out some of the stressed syllables here and there. There is comfort soaking in the known routine, predictability with a side of certainty, poured out each morning as I gaze in the bowl of cereal and see events of the day rotating like cornflakes and milky mundane. This poem doesn't flow. Why? Because I started the poem with words that have lots of syllables like predictability and certainty, the foundational pacing of this poem is constructed to come off as very dense. Also, not only are my words wordy, but they also pack a ton of T sounds, which I think only further amplifies the effect of density and sharpness. In the first version, I continue to lean into the high syllable density, incorporating out of a box instead of just out, or into instead of just in. These subtle word choices allow the first version of this poem to flow properly, with the very ending of it feeling on beat, while the second version just feels a little off. To see if a line or stanza has a nice meter, just read it out loud. If at any point it feels a little bit too wordy or not wordy enough, you know your meter is off. Consider either removing or adding words to adjust the count of syllables. Replacing words with synonyms that contain different syllables can also fix the balance.
At the end of the day, follow your gut. Follow what sounds right to you. But be brutally honest with yourself and adjust words as needed. And when it feels right, it is.
Now equipped with the tools and frame of mind, let's get quiet. Sit in silence. Just you, the world around you, and a way to write something down. Sit in silence. Thoughts, ideas, and words will inevitably emerge from the quiet, given enough time to present themselves. Your stack of life experience will begin to make itself known. Your job is to decide which moments to grab onto and which ones to let go by. Don't overthink it. It's more about the feeling. All you need to do is let the words write themselves through you.
And write without logic. Don't be afraid to say something crazy. Write what feels right, not what makes sense. I can't overstate this enough. You must give time, and you must not hold back. Allow yourself to be surprised that you wrote something. It is through this letting go and letting out that the beneficial processing of life manifests. Whether you're compelled to confront loss, particular moments of embarrassment, beautiful moments with loved ones, or any one of the infinite experiences that hold weight in life, you have to learn to let go and allow them to flow onto the page without judgment.
Now that you've let the creative wisdom of the universe flow through you and are on your way to completing a poem, let's briefly chat about the editing process. As you're writing, it's important to take a step back and read the poem all the way through. I do this with every new line I add. This gives me real-time feedback on the flow of the poem. 2. Poetry is alive for as long as you want it to be. I've went back and read poems that I wrote years ago and realized there's a better word to more accurately convey the idea I was trying to convey at the time. So I changed the word. You can write poems and never touch them again. Or you can go back and improve them forever. You choose. What really matters is the process you follow helps facilitate a greater understanding and connection with yourself and the world around you.
The ironic thing about poetry is that great poetry takes you to places that words can't go. Great poetry leaves you speechless.
Words are tools that allow us to make sense of the world, to make sense of our lives, to categorize things, create mental maps and correlation, to convey and communicate with one another. But for as much as I love words, the best moments in life are free of them. They are the moments no words could ever explain. To even try would be an insult. I feel the earth within me, providing refuge for my soul, as my limbs soak in sunbeams, sprouting aerial roots that cling to discovering the infinite array of realities existence compels me to ponder. Clouds of moss float in canopy,
providing poetic rain that dissolves in my skin. Each drop freeing my insides beyond the prior conclusions of the person I am. I flow freely, writing parts of me, sparking undercurrents of personality. Words hydrate leaves, synthesizing colors of novelty, dispersing pigments of experience beyond the edges of wet paper or the sides of my tongue, into the realm of the great unspoken, where the rarest of moments reside. In the feeling of home, I lay beneath light gleam, face dappled by green petal, asking, why am I here? Like clockwork, the universe answers, what do you notice? What draws you near? Whispering curiosities of new frontiers, smiling as they meet my ear, I think, how warm. Then write one more line. I see you, you beautiful life form.
Oh my goodness. Look at you. Look at you. Look at you.